So this week we have a 2014 plate Volvo V60 1.6 diesel with the terrible Ford PowerShift gearbox in it. It's juddering and losing drive when it goes up an incline. Let's see what's wrong with it. So we've taken it out for a test drive, confirmed it's definitely juddering on pull away. And we haven't experienced it losing drive, but we can see it happening because the juddering is very bad when you're pulling away. So let's get it plugged in, see what the scan says. We've got all 4 shift forks stuck and a solenoid problem. Typically we only see shift forks D being stuck when the springs and plastics have gone, so that means there's something else going on in this box. So let's have a look. So, on to removal. First off, you have to get into the correct stance to make the lift go up. So the lift will go up, then we can start removing the gearbox. First job, we're going to drop the oil. And I'll be honest, the oil doesn't look too bad, which is keeping us in high hopes for what we're actually going to find inside this box. Obviously I've skipped a lot here because you guys are not interested in the gearbox coming out. The gearbox is coming out and it will go over to the workshop to Steve so you can start taking it apart. So this is a Ford PowerShift gearbox. It's a 6-speed DCT. Came out in 2008. Right. It's been fitted to C-Maxes, Mondeos, Ford Edges, basically across the whole Ford range, and including some Volvos. This one is leaking from the front and we believe the springs and plastics in the clutch have collapsed. So let's have a look. Right, let's start getting this PowerShift apart then. First off, we have to remove the front cover. That reveals the clutch packs and the dual mass. The dual mass contains the springs and plastics that normally collapse on these gearboxes. The springs in this box are incredibly loose. The good news is they haven't actually collapsed and broken, but they are very, very loose. So they will also need replacing, and we'll probably put some modified larger springs inside it to get rid of all the slack that's in there. Now that the clutches are out, we can move on to taking the oil pump out. This is run by the back of the clutch, and then we'll move on from there to removing the valve body, which is under the plastic cover on the side. This plastic cover is prone to cracking and leaking, which obviously causes issues with the box. When the oil level gets low, the valve body won't work out it should do, which then impacts the quality of the springs and plastics inside it. Now that the cover's off, Steve's going to buzz the bolts out so we can remove this valve body. It does say on the diagnostic sheet that there is a solenoid problem with this box. So we'll take a closer look at this valve body once we've got the box apart and inspected all the parts inside the gearbox. To start with, on this box there's actually 3 separate parts to the casing. Unlike other boxes where there's just the bell housing and the rear case, with this there's a bell housing, a rear case and then a further rear case which holds in the bearings at the top of the pinion. So these bolts that Steve's undoing now, smaller ones, actually bolt into the bearing to hold it in place. So once those are out, it actually loosens up the gear set inside the box. Then we move on to removing the bell housing bolts. This is just to make sure that everything comes apart nice and easily. Then the detents come out. These hold tension in the shift forks. And as you can see by the effort that Steve's putting in, this very top rear case is very stiff to get off. But once it's off, it will reveal the top of the gear set. And you can see there, underneath the bearings are plates, and those plates are what the end case actually bolts into. Steve's just going to pull off this bearing, and then we'll get to two of the most difficult bolts on this box. So one is normal thread, one is reverse thread. They're done up extremely tight, and they are Loctited into place from factory. So we have to use the biggest air gun we've got to actually get them undone. Once those are off, we can use two pry bars on the outside of this bearing to pull it off. Once those are off, the top gears can come off and the synchros. Then the bell housing will come off, and that reveals the gear set. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this gear set, see if there's any shift elements that are causing us to get the shift fork errors. So we're going to remove the gear set so we can take a closer inspection of everything inside. Once that is done, we'll move on to removing the shift elements from inside the gearbox. So the forks will come out, and then these rubber plungers come out. These are controlled by pressure to move the shift forks up and down. Then it's the oil pump. So we're removing the oil pump so we can examine the filter and the insides of the filter to see if there's any debris from plastics, swarf from any of the shift elements inside, like the synchros, the hubs. Then everything will get head over to the hot wash so we can clean it all up, so we can get a good look and inspect everything without it all being covered in oil and potentially hiding any gremlins inside the box. So we've got the box completely apart, been through it all, it's now in the wash. The only thing that we seem to have found that seems to be the issue is the springs and plastics, although not broken, are extremely loose. So we're going to do some digging and some research to find out how comes all four of the shift forks were stuck, and there was a solenoid problem, which means we're going to put the valve body on test and go through it and see what we can find in there. So before the valve body can go on test, we need to remove the mechatronic unit, which is the brain of the gearbox, from the valve body, so it doesn't get contaminated and completely full of oil while it's on the test rig. The test rig has its own mech system, so we then bolt that to the back of the valve body, so then we can bolt the valve body to the test plate. Now that's bolted down, we're running it through the system. As you can see, it pumps through ATF and checks that each chamber is working correctly. The computer program runs through each gear, putting pressure into each one and making sure they are within tolerance. It will also check both clutch systems to make sure that the pressures are working correctly in those, so when it's in the vehicle, the clutches are applying and not applying correctly. So this is the Hydra test machine. We use this to test valve bodies. The hydraulic test for the DCT 450 has come back perfectly fine, and the test for the solenoids has also come back perfectly fine. If you look, there are dotted lines, which is a master, which is how it would have been when it came out of the factory. The solid coloured lines are the results that we have got from the valve body that we have rebuilt. So with there being no issues with this valve body, it's back to looking at the box. There must be something inside it that's physically not right. So we're going to dig through it, take extra care looking at the forks, see if there's any play or any movement in them, and see what we can find. As you've seen, there's no problems with the valve body, which was a bit of a shock. So we've re-examined the shift forks a bit closer, and these have movement in them, which isn't a lot, but it's enough to cause a fault, and every fork is the same.
So where do we get our gearbox parts from? We work in partnership with AutoLink Automatics, a specialist gearbox parts supply company with years of industry experience. Whether it's service kits, seals, gaskets, filters, or replacement transmission components, AutoLink stocks an extensive range of parts for automatic gearboxes. They supply components from some of the biggest names in the industry, including ZF, Aisin, Sachs, and Borg-Warner, ensuring we have access to the quality parts needed to carry out reliable repairs. Quality parts, specialist knowledge, trusted support. That's why AutoLink Automatics is our gearbox parts supplier of choice.
So I've been on my travels over to AutoLink Automatics and I've collected 4 new DCT 450 shift forks. Also collected 2 lots of the larger modified springs that will take out the looseness in the springs and create the tension that is needed. As you can see, Steve has started the rebuild. He's already got both the input shafts in and the differential, and he's going to move on to getting the oil pump in. Once the oil pump is in, it will get torqued to spec and have a fresh internal oil filter fitted. Once the oil pump is torqued to spec, we can then move on to installing the rest of the gear set. This could be a fiddly job purely because of how many pinions there are in the box and how tightly they all fit together, with the shift forks already having to be in place. Once the gear set is in, we'll make sure everything spins freely, then we can move on to the next steps. Once all the internal gearbox parts are in place, we will lay a nice bead of silicone around the outside of the mating service and then put the first rear/middle casing onto the gearbox. Once that is in, we can add the synchros into the hubs and then get ready to put those gears on. Steve likes to put the roller bearings in after he's put the gears on to make sure that the synchros have sat properly underneath the gears. This could be a tricky job which can take a little bit of time just to make sure that the synchros are sat correctly so you can actually engage those gears when the box is back together. Then the bearings can go on, and those 2 bolts that go in the top can have fresh Loctite applied and then get done up extremely tight. Steve has actually created 2 dowels that go in those bearings at the top to make sure that they are seated correctly for when they need bolting in from outside of the case. Then we'll lay a nice bead of silicone around the outer casing and that will get slid into place. This could also be a fiddly job because not only have you got to get the pinions and the bearings in the correct place, but also the 4 shift fork ends slot into that casing. Once the casing is on over the dowels, bolt that down and you can move on to doing the smaller bolts that hold in the bearings. These are the modified springs, so they're slightly longer than the original springs, which will create the correct tension in the dampening, which means that there'll be no rattling and it will still be able to engage gears perfectly fine. Once those springs are fitted, we can actually start fitting the clutch and the dual mass flywheel into the gearbox. Much like the DSGs, this is a fiddly job that involves rotating parts backwards and forwards to make sure all the clutch frictions and steels are sat in the correct place. That's the clutch is in place. So now the clutch is in place and the cages, which means we can now put on the dampening cover, which holds the springs and plastics. He's using the lip wizard to make sure that the seal is sat correctly so we don't get any leaks from that cover. Then the 3 retaining clips are fitted and bolted down, which means that gearbox is now complete, ready to go back to the Volvo. So there you go. That's how you diagnose and repair a Ford PowerShift for a Volvo. If you like the video, like and subscribe. We'll see you next week for another one.